Okay. Hello, dear viewers. Today I'm going to provide you with a walkthrough of the Lamentations of the Flame Princess referee guide by James Edward Radji IV. Um, Mainly because that's the location of the adventure A Stranger Storm, and the party in my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign had just completed that. Before I get into that, though, real quick, there was no game last night as I and a few players had sick kids and were getting sick themselves, and my throat feels a little wonky still. Uh, but so we'll see if I can get through this. If not, I'll just re-record it later. um, but the referee guide can be found a free copy at the LOTFP website. The link's right there. I'll put the link below in the description. And I'm going to try to provide another video tomorrow or the next day or two to keep working on my deep dive with the rules of Magic book. And of course, we're still scheduled to keep rolling on Lamentations of Elemental Evil. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, the referee guide came from a Grindhouse box set that I want to say was published in 2011. I don't own it. I had to basically get the PDF of the referee guide from the website. And there are a lot of DM advice out there, referee advice out there, in everything from videos, talking heads, and then you got books. There's only a few I would recommend, and this is one of them. Mainly because I think the overarching um, tone is just the level of honesty that uh, James Edward Radji IV provides in the referee guide. I mean, he doesn't mince words. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, and at the same time, he's providing you with another way of looking at an adventure that you're not going to get anywhere else. So, um, and the guide starts off by just asking a very fundamental question. What is a referee? And the conclusion is the referee is the game. And this may come as a shock to contemporary players who are used to playing more contemporary systems that are complete games where the rules pretty much dictate everything. But in this old school style, this is a very true statement. The referee has to provide the challenges to the players. That's the adventure, and they have to create the campaign that encompasses all of the adventures that take place. And of course, they're the ones that are running the damn games. Um, the referee, the games won't exist without the referee, and that's even true with contemporary games because at the very least, the contemporary game master is using like fifth edition or Pathfinder, or they're the ones still stringing these things together and creating like an environment for everyone to play. So I don't think this is a false statement. I think people sort of balk at that though and think, well, this is sort of inequitable or something. But when you think about it, um, the referees putting all the work in, even if it's just stringing a series of pre-made adventures together. They're still doing the work, reading them, prepping them, figuring out a logical consistency from one adventure to the next. And what I really like in this section of the referee's guide, James, it basically tells you this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it might not seem worth it. He actually describes, the three types of players who end up becoming referees. One is, the rules lawyer type who wants to lord over his players. One is, the would-be author who wants to, write fantastic stories, and then there's the guy who just gets stuck being the referee because no one else wants to do it. And James states, the guy who's stuck doing it is most likely going to be the better referee out of the gate, um, and for reasons that will become apparent, as we kind of go through this. But at the end of the day, all three can be great referees through practice and honest assessment of their abilities. And at the end of the day, and I think every game master out there can attest this, it's a lot of work, um, and it might not seem worth it, except for the players that keep coming back every week. I have a Discord, and these guys I'm playing with on the Lamentation of Elemental Evil campaign, I haven't really played with them much. I've gotten to know them, over the past few weeks, but it's really exciting to see them get excited about the upcoming game. And that's true. So the referee is the game, and if you and you'll see in this referee guide, you'll see that as you work and get better, the games are going to get better and are going to be exciting, and your players are going to just want to keep on coming back for more. Um, this section, I like this section a lot too because it states something that I don't think is clearly stated in other RPG DM's guides and whatnot. Partly because it gets broken down. What are the rules? And he states, right off the back, they're more of a concept than anything that actually governs play. And number two is really important for OSR. The rules are not there to define what actions are allowed or disallowed, but rather to resolve situations which come up in the course of play. Um, that is very, very different from what you see in contemporary games. I liken it to push button D&D. That's what I call it. When I was running fifth edition games, or even earlier, like fourth or third edition games, you describe a situation and players immediately look down at their sheet to figure out what button to push, what dice to roll, what skill to use. Um, that's not OSR play. Number two really captures what OSR play is. It's you pull those rules when they're needed. Otherwise, you're just doing number three, recognizing when you do not have a rule or a situation comes up and you have to resolve something. That's the ruling over rules, um, and that right there is what OSR play is all about. And James, brilliantly and succinctly explains that in this section. In fact, in prepping this video, I was rereading some of these sections, and it was jogging my memory and reminding me, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to remember to do this the next time this sort of thing comes up, and um, uh, that's the hallmark of a good referee guy. I think when you keep coming back to it and you pull something new out of it. So yeah, you are the referee. You change something if you don't like it. That's another wonderful thing about OSR play, and Lamentations of the Flame Princess is no different. Um, there's stuff I'm going to be doing with the Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign that might deviate a little bit from traditional LOTFP games, but that's because I have a particular thing I'm doing with that campaign, and I want to make sure the rules fit that tone and the world that I'm creating. Uh, Rule 0. This is my favorite rule, and James does not shy away from it. The referee is the final authority in all matters for his campaign, above the letter and the spirit of the rules. The rules are not the game. I completely 100% agree with that. Um, I am a Rule 0 game master. I have no problem saying no. I try not to, and I don't like saying no, but sometimes you got to say no, and that's what this section is really all about. And then he follows it up though with Rule 1. Don't be a jerk, don't be a dick to your players, don't antagonize them. I mean, we're all here to have fun. Sometimes I allow for a little rules discussion at the table if there's a something controversial about a potential uh, you know ruling I'm about to make, or a potential controversial situation that the party finds themselves in. But but at the end of the day, all the players have to recognize that when the referee speaks, that's it. Let's move on. And if it's a mistake later on afterwards, well, you've corrected the next time that situation comes up. But Rule Zero, I think, is very important for keeping the game flow. During my 5e games, uh, that I was either a player in or running, you'd have the immersion would get broken because we have a 20-minute conversation about a proper ruling, and this that's coming from a quote collaborative storytelling end quote sort of mentality from the players on the or at the table. And I that collaborative storytelling just opens the door for the rules lawyer to step in and say, well, no, this is how things should go. um, it's going to be up to you how you handle it, but I think Rule Zero needs to be clearly stated and adhered to, and James does that here. And he also says, while the dice rule the game in the sense of, adjudicating the rules, you shouldn't be fudging the dice. And I say see Rule One because if you're fudging the dice, especially to fit some weird narrative that you might have, and you want to see a particular outcome, it's taking away agency from the players, and it's kind of a dick move. And on that note, I might take a quick digression and dive into the dice fudging debate that constantly comes up on Twitter, Reddit, various other social media sites. Um, I sort of don't have the same, I guess puritanical view that a lot of OSR players have on device fudging. If I know I've made a mistake, um, in a ruling, and it's going to have a detriment to the players, or if I like design an encounter that's not going the way that was just like completely overly difficult when I wanted it to be easy or something, I might behind the scenes kind of correct my error without letting the players know. But 99% of the time, I let the dice fall where they may. But what I wanted to do with this meme, which I think is the one of the top memes of all memes, because it really captures the essence of what I think the game mastering is, especially in the OSR context. Um, when one fudges dice, it's because something unexpected happens, and you have a novice game master who doesn't know what to do. Okay, and that this comes down to practice and knowing that this is going to happen every game, and through practice you're going to get better at being able to roll with those random events that were completely unexpected. That's the whole point of emergent storytelling. The dice, when you call for that roll, you're committing to what's going to happen, and that's the fun of emergent storytelling. And for me, it's the fun of being a game master when you're like, oh well, I didn't never thought that was going to happen. Okay, how do I handle this? And then you think on your feet, and you move forward with the storytelling. I think a lot of the dice fudging arguments, I think, are too accusatory. I think they're too. I don't think they're really addressing what the issue is. They're too busy like pointing fingers and saying, "Well, if you're fudging dice, you're cheating and you're robbing players their agency." And then the other side's like, "Well, if you don't fudge dice, you're not creating a compelling narrative, and you're going to kill players indiscriminately, and their characters won't have meaning." And I don't think that is at all fruitful for the discussion. I think it's about understanding what dice fudging really is about, and that's about that inexperienced game master not really knowing what to do. And it still happens for me time to time where I'm just like, oh God, I might need a few minutes to think about this, you know. Um, and along with practice of being a game master, you get to a point where you know when you need to call for a role and when not to. And like I said, the moment you call for a role, you're committing to an action and you're committing to an outcome. Okay, whatever that outcome may be. There are going to be times when you don't need to call for a role, so don't do it. I've seen too many novice game masters make call for a role that they probably shouldn't have called for, and then it creates a really bizarre, wonky situation because the poor sod, myself included, because I've been in these situations, rolled a natural one, and so they didn't hear the explosion down the street for some reason, and so the character is all by himself, not participating in whatever the rest of the party's doing because of that natural one that was rolled. Um, so that's what I think this meme is really getting at. Like at some point through practice, you're just going to know, and you're going to be able to do it, and then you're not going to want to fudge dice because you want to see what happens, and to be sure, players commit to this as well. The moment a social encounter breaks down and becomes a combat encounter, to me, they've signed a contract. We're going to let the dice fall where they may. You're the ones that drew your swords. We're going to see what happens. May God be with you. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, and we'll get back to James because I think you all would rather see what James has to say than I. So, uh, finding your groove. I've been kind of hitting on this. This is James telling you it's okay to make mistakes. This is James telling you that you're going to need to just practice and keep working at it. I have an example that I use. Practicing being a game master is like practicing the study of law. That's why they call it a law practice. They don't call it a law algorithm. They don't call it a law process. They call it a practice. You just need to do it and you get better at it. Same thing with game mastering. And in fact, there's a lot of similarities between what a lawyer does and what a game master does, in my opinion. So, how do you become a good referee? You play. Grab your dice, grab your friends, grab an adventure, and start going to it. In fact, the adventure at the end of the referee's guide is a really good one to start with. So practice makes perfect, I guess, is what this section is ultimately trying to say. So now, of course, this is Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and so James goes into what it is to be weird and have weird horror. Um, and what he's trying to do here is to explain how to balance player agency and with building vulnerability and helplessness. You don't want to tell your players, "Oh, you're scared. You can't do anything," because that's you're taking away their agency. He's recommending using against fear or sanity rules. I think that's good advice, generally speaking. Certainly, if you play Lamentations of the Flame Princess modules, you won't need Fear or Sanity rules. You just won't. Because the games generally are weird enough. And once you start explaining and describing the events, your players are going to feel uncertain about what to do, and they get very protective of their character sheets. So, um, he's recommending using a normal campaign world as close to normal as possible. I think that's why he uses the 17th century for a lot of his the sort of the default setting. Be graphic. I like being graphic personally. Some people think I'm a little over the top. I don't. I just think we're talking about hacking each other to pieces with claw and sword and fire. I mean, it's going to be graphic. So, be mysterious. Use mystery. Hide things from. Well, don't hide things from the players, but feed them the information slowly. Right. Get them into it. He's got a neat little section here about science versus magic and how you should probably you can use both. I'm not a science guy, so I'm not one to sci-fi is just not my thing. So, um, but then he recommends also a twist. Something that's going to trick the players. It's going to be unexpected, and make things interesting and strange and weird for them. It's a very good section to read. Uh, um, okay, he's got a section on the adventure. I'm not going to really summarize this because I think a lot of this is pretty standard stuff. But he does go into the 5 things he thinks you need: deadly situations, freedom of choice, success and failure, rewards, and variety. Um, the all of which I think is spot on and is something worth remembering whenever you sit down to write something homebrew. He tackles what railroading is, and I think this word, railroading, in the gaming community, if there is such a thing as a gaming community, the hobby, I think is the most misunderstood one. You're not railroading your players if a logical consequence follows from an action. You're railroading your players if you're, well, I guess fudging dice. So some predetermined outcome happens. If it basically you're railroading your players if you make it so their choices don't matter. And I think that's very succinct and very true. The section covers obstacles, traps, and how to pace an adventure. But ultimately, you come up with a location or a situation, introduce the players to it, sit back and see what happens. That's some fly by the seat of your pants gaming right there. Similar to the adventure section, he goes over what a campaign is. Um, I do think the what a campaign is traditionally from an OSR standpoint is lost on the modern gamer. The campaign really is about world building and the player's role in that world. Um, and he talks about the 2 different ways you can do that: prior design versus accumulated play. I'm a prior design kind of guy. My homebrew world of Arnor is where the Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign is taking place, and I'm seeding the players information as we play. I'm just trying to avoid a lore dump on those poor guys. But I see accumulated play as something that is kind of fun to do, and it's sort of like kind of on the fly. Probably good for a Gonzo type setting. NPCs, again, uh, this is kind of covered ground in a lot of ways, but it does drive home the point that if you have NPCs in your world, there's 2 things that they're doing. They're interacting with the players, and when they're not interacting with the players, they're doing something else. That's how you have a living, breathing world. So make sure you have that understanding with what the NPCs are and what they're doing. They, I like how he notes stats are the least important part of an NPC. It's really the characterization. I really like that he emphasized this. I like doing that, and I also like breaking the rules when I make NPCs. And James certainly encourages you to do that. If you want an NPC to do extra damage in a game system that doesn't typically allow for extra damage, but that extra damage is because this NPC is like magically strong, go for it. That'll just make the NPC more realistic to your players. Okay, my favorite section, monsters. Um, this is where Lamentations of the Flame Princess really deviates from a lot of other OSR fantasy systems and worlds. Less is more. The monster is the central feature. You're not going to be fighting hordes of goblins. You're going to be fighting one thing, maybe 2, right? That, excuse me, that is horrific and is going to challenge the players. I think that is awesome, and it really makes the weird horror pop when you're combining that technique with a normal sort of world that's very, very similar to our real world. Um, but I also like he mentions normal animals are monsters too. I I have I can't remember the last time I got into a fight with a bear. Bears could be deadly. Why wouldn't you use them? Um, but so think of ways of using them in creative ways. And then he goes into monster design and that sort of thing. So with that, I, magic items. He talks very intelligently and succinctly about what magic is. Magic is power, and it's going to define a character. I don't think I've seen any referee guide say anything like this anywhere. I think it's because there's this idea that magic items are super cool and we're just going to give them to players because it'll make them happy and they'll get to swing a flaming sword or have, a robe that has shurikens embedded in it or something. I don't know. I've always, always, always hated how magic seems too readily available for players. And I just love this. I just love this. Keep it rare, unique, and keep it mysterious. That's how magic should be. If you want magic to be a fearsome thing in your world, your random NPC shouldn't be walking around with a +2 dagger, which, by the way, is in the Temple of Elemental Evil. Guys, if you're listening to this, they're not going to be carrying around +2 daggers. Okay, I'm taking them all out. Um, so so yeah, keep it rare. And you're gonna and when they do find it, it's gonna be super special, especially if you've gone into some history behind the weapon or item. And he does provide tips for that sort of thing. You'll probably see more potions and scrolls than anything else because there's actual rules in the Rules of Magic book on how to make those. I'll eventually cover that. And then I really like this Dispel Magic, permanently disenchants magic items. Love that. Absolutely love it. I like how there's a counter. It's a great way to take away something that maybe is too powerful. You know. Okay, the next two sections basically cover a variety of GMing advice that really didn't fit any other sections. Again, I don't think you're going to see talking heads on who make a living making videos for fifth edition say anything that's going to be in the referee guide. It's just you're just not going to see it. For example, I love this. Just because the players like it doesn't mean it should be included in your game. I think I saw the exact opposite being peddled by some talking head Wizards of the Coast shill. So yeah, these two sections are worth just reading every now and again to remind you, what it is that you're doing when you sit at the table as a referee. And then this section also provides conversion rules to bring other content from other OSR systems into Lamentations of the Flame Princess and vice versa. Very useful. Very useful. Okay, Stranger Storm, the intro adventure. Spoiler warning: if you're a player, you should probably stop the video right now. If you're a game master, by all means, keep listening. So basically, this is an intro game that's in the back of the referee's guide, and it gives little text boxes of James giving you some advice on what to do and how to do it. Throughout this entire section, there's no maps, there's no stats really of the monsters, the changelings that are in here. It's really just about the chaos that these creatures uh, enjoy creating. And boy, did he write an adventure that was successful in that regard. So yeah, the changelings do not have stats, and as that's essentially what happens. So like the players are stuck in this storm. They're making their way to this inn called the Incontinent Vicar. They find a body on the side of the road that looks like it was murdered, and when they get to the inn, there's a suspicion that the murderer might be at the inn. It's depends on how the players sort of like think through this, and then as they're talking to the innkeep, eventually a duplicate of the innkeep shows up, and that's when the chaos starts because that's when everyone realizes there's changelings. Their goal is to cause havoc, and part of that havoc creating ability that they have is that they duplicate the memories of whatever they're mimicking. So you can't like trick them into revealing themselves. The players really have to think to get around and figure out who they're fighting. And if you do fight a mimic who's mimicked a player, the game master is to record the damage, not the player. So the player doesn't know how much damage they're taking, and then eventually one will die, and maybe the player's now the mimic. It's excuse me, the changeling. So it's a real crazy adventure, and well, I'm about to go into my ultimate conclusion, but I'm going to wait. So there are factions in this adventure which I think are good to have in almost any adventure. It gives the player something to work off of. There are some merchants, some minstrels. There's the inns employees, and then there's clergy. Now, if you're watching my game, the party didn't get that far. They set fire to the buildings and ran. Uh, so, um, but all of these factions have their own motivations, which only adds to the chaos. And without using any game mechanics, this adventure is successful in creating that chaos and uncertainty and vulnerability. It happened with my players. I've seen actual plays of this module, and the same thing. They got so fed up trying to figure this out that, well, they just added to the chaos themselves. Um, and But this module does reward clever players. Uh, and if the players are struggling, there is an NPC, Father Naylor, who can help them out. So I like that too. There is some horrific stuff, and this image is from the game. Again, my players didn't get this far, but a mimic, or excuse me, a changeling makes it to an orphanage, and a knight is wants to figure it out and get rid of the right one. Um, it definitely is a Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventure for sure. Looks like I accidentally duplicated a slide. That's okay. So, the Flame Princess Referee Guide. Should you pick it up? Of course. It's free. Just go to the website and check it out. It's got a lot of good advice. I love James's honesty. He's not pulling any punches. He tells you like what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing as a OSR referee. It's and if you're interested in weird horror, this is the guide that's going to help you do that. Um, I think this is as important as the OSR primer and other books that I typically are my go-tos for advice for gaming. So you should definitely pick up the referee guide and read it, and just peruse it every so often. Um, and so that's all I got real quick. Just want to say thank you for everyone who's been subscribing. I don't know if 30 in 2 weeks is good or not. I don't know. I'm new to this, but I just want to say thank you so very much. It means a lot. Keep sharing these videos wherever. And if you're new, like and subscribe. And if there's games, modules, rule systems you want me to check out, let me know. Put it in the comments below. I'll run a game and then I'll talk about it. That's what this is about. So, with that said, thank you so much again, and stay tuned. There will be more to come. Take it easy.